We're going to do something a little out of the ordinary today. And it's a response of a request that I had from you, the congregation. Several of you have said to me, you know, Pastor, I get that we're supposed to have dreams, and I get that they're supposed to be God's dreams, but I don't know how that works out in my life. And so the suggestion was, and I think it's a great one, that just for a couple minutes, that several of you from the congregation over the coming weeks share with us, how did God's dreams work out in your life? What did they mean to you? How did you get those dreams? And so we're going to have several people share how this teaching has impacted them over the years. Not that they necessarily just heard it and it did something, but how it impacted them over the years. And they're only going to take about 5 minutes per Sunday, but we already have at least 2 scheduled. And Josh is going to share with us this morning. Miriam, when she gets her voice back, hopefully in 2 weeks, because next Sunday is who? Boys Gym Club. So we'll let the Boys Gym Club do their thing, and that'll give her voice 2 weeks to heal. And so I'm excited to hear how the teaching on God's dreams within our lives has impacted several of you. If you want to share, come up and see me afterwards, just as the other folks did, and we'll be glad to give you just a few minutes to share. Brother Josh, excuse me. How long have I known you? And I call you John. That's because I'm looking at John.
So, Pastor asked me to share with you guys this morning. Him and Miriam were talking about it, and sounds like Martin Luther King here. I had a dream, so I've had a few, but there's one that comes up in the forefronts of my mind. It was about 16 years ago. It was probably about 2000 is when I had the dream. I was still attending college at the time, and my mom was still here, and I was going through some things in my life, and they were very troubling things. I was dealing with panic attacks and anxiety and some things, struggles, and just having a hard time. So through that, God's amazing love shone through it, and it brought me to Christ. My mom raised me in this church when I was little. She unfortunately got sick, and I fell away for a while, and I partook in the world for some time, but God had a better plan for me, and through that plan, He brought me back to Him. After I gave my life back to Christ, I was hoping that some of them struggles would just dissolve, and some of them did, but not all of them. And I begged and pleaded with the Lord to take, as Apostle Paul talks about, take that thorn away from my flesh. And some days it was less, some days it was more, and it still was there. It was persistent. So I endured, and I eventually told God, I says, you know what, Lord, if this is your plan, and this is what will glorify you, and this is where you want me in life, I'll endure. I don't need you to take this away for me to know that you love me. And I don't think it was shortly after that God answered that. And I went to bed. It was a Saturday night, and I haven't told many people this. There's only a handful of people that I've shared this story with, because I don't want it to sound arrogant or prideful. So I've cherished this treasure that God's given me for a long time in my life. And I know I've shared this with Pastor and my wife and a few close friends, but or a few people that I felt that were struggling really bad that needed encouragement. But other than that, I've really kind of cherished this in my own life. So today's the day to share it. So to the church, but so I went to bed. It was a Saturday night. It was before me and my wife were married, and Sunday would come, and my wife would pick me up for church, and we would come here. And it was no different than 100 Saturdays before, but I went to bed, and I remember being woken up. I think it was 3 o'clock in the morning. But it was different. It wasn't being woke up and here I am in bed. It felt like for a moment in time I was taken somewhere away from here, somewhere outside my body, I guess would be a good way of explaining it. And I was caught up in just a light, I guess the best way to put it, almost like a cloud, but the cloud in itself was like a light, and it was just penetrating through me. And it wasn't so much what I saw because the light was overwhelming, but the warmth and the feeling of where I was at was indescribable. There's really not words to express it, except for maybe the purest form of love. You just I felt something I haven't felt in a long time, especially dealing with fear and anxiety in my life. This was something I longed for, and God gave it to me. And in that vision, there was angels, and them angels were surrounding me, and they were just kind of flowing around me. I don't know how many there were. Didn't know their names. They didn't speak to me at all, but I just knew that they were there, and I could see their presence kind of just flowing around me, and they were quite astounding. So, and I felt like I didn't say the words, but I was just, I was in this place where I knew He holds all answers, and I felt like, just, Lord, what do you want to tell me in this? And I was waiting for some profound answer to my struggles. And all He said was, fear not. That's all He said. Fear not. And shortly after that, I felt like I came back into my bed, into my body, and woke up. I mean, it was boom, I'm awake, very awake. Looked at the clock, it was 3-something. And I thought, wow, that was amazing. That was something I've never experienced in my life. It wasn't a normal dream. It wasn't anything that I've ever experienced in my life before. And I felt like just treasuring that and pondering that. And I said, fear not, fear not. This is good. But that's not quite what I wanted, Lord, Give me something else. I've been trying not to fear not for a long time now, but He did. He answered in a marvelous way. And the story doesn't end there. So eventually I probably fell back to sleep, and then my alarm woke me in the morning. My wife picked me up, and I'm pondering this thing and just going through my head, what this means and what this was. And we come to church, sit down in the pew. Haven't said nothing to my wife or anything. This is something I'm trying to work through my spirit. And the message that day was on God's angels. Pastor delivered a message. I thought, wow. It's just, isn't it amazing? God can work through so many outside sources, and you start to see His plan unfold and Him speaking just to your heart, to my heart. He was talking to me. And I nudged my wife in the pew that we sit. For 16 years now, we've sat in that pew. We've been talking about changing that pew, but we never do. But I nudged her and I said, I got to tell you something. Something strange happened to me last night. And she says, yeah, something strange happened to me too. And I said, wow, okay. So we went through church and, through fellowship time, and we got in the car and we were driving home. And so I said, I don't know who brought it up, but I remember saying, what did you want to tell me? And I thought, this is too good. I don't want God to take this away from me here. So I says, why don't you tell me first what you experienced last night, and then I'll tell you. And she goes, yeah, it was just the strangest thing. She goes, I woke up in the middle of the night, she goes, and my hand hurt really, really bad. And I says, yeah. I says, well, you know, she goes, I was clenching something. She goes, and it woke me out of a dead sleep. And I says, okay, you know. And I said, well, what was it? She goes, well, I didn't know until I got up and I got out of bed and I turned the light on and looked at it. She says, I had a pin. Is it a pin? Was it a coin? A coin in my hand of a guardian angel that was given to me by my grandfather a long time ago that I lost. She goes, I haven't seen it in years. And I just woke up with this guardian angel coin in my hand. Have no idea where it was. Have no idea where it's been. But woke up. And I says, well, and I mean, if that isn't amazing enough, I said, well, what time was it? She says 3 o'clock. So, so God does work in dreams. And he loves, I mean, this isn't a statement of look at me or anything, because that's why I don't share that story. I don't want that to become what the story's about, because it isn't about. What the story is really about is, you know, God is very, very much in tune with your troubles. He cares for you. He knows very well what you're going through. He knew what I needed. He knew I needed that encouragement. And even to this day, sometimes when doubt sets into my mind, he brings that to my thought. I'm the Timothy that had to put my finger in the side, and it's a humbling expression, but you know, God knew I needed that. I needed that encouragement to get through what I was going through, to get through what I've been through and what I was going to have to go through and what I still have to go through. He knew I needed that, and he gave that to me. It's a special gift. It was also a confirmation that my wife at the time, which was my girlfriend, was that one. He included her in that, and it was a special thing for us to know that God's approval was on our relationship. So, and there's other things that he's spoken to me about through that situation and that dream, but it's just amazing. It is amazing, and I thank him for the power he has, the gentleness, how he speaks softly and quietly to us, and he's always there. And that's one thing I've realized out of that. He's always there, and that's what I have. So I'll give it back to you. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Dreaming God's Dreams. This has turned into a series. I had a feeling that it would. And so we're looking at Dreaming God's Dreams, which is really the same thing as finding God's purpose and finding his plans. And God has short-range plans and medium-range plans and long-range plans for your life. And so we look to him to share with us what those plans and what those purposes are. And he's very gentle and very methodical as he reveals those plans to us. So finding God's plans and his purposes. We've shared with you already the book of Acts, chapter 13, verse 36. When David, as an old man, when David had fulfilled God's purposes, that is God's plans for his life, in his own generation, God took him home. He fell asleep. Some of you are wondering, what am I still doing here? God's not done with you yet. That's what you're still doing here. You still have a purpose in his plan. And Philippians chapter 2, verse 13. And it is who is at work in you? God is at work in you. Just kind of even under your breath, say that to yourself. God is at work in me? Yeah, he's at work in you. How do I know that? Because the Word of God says so. That's how. And God doesn't lie. It is God who works in you to fulfill his good purposes. Remember, the purposes of God are always good. This is kind of our theme for this series is Job chapter 33, verse 15. God speaks. To some of you, you're not even real sure that God speaks. Let me assure you, God is the supreme communicator of the universe. He communicates. He speaks, and He longs to speak to you personally. Personally. Again, sometimes through the circumstances of life, sometimes through dreams, sometimes through friends, sometimes through the preacher. In the Old Testament, God spoke through a donkey. So I feel really comfortable in saying God can speak through me. He spoke through Balaam's donkey in the Old Testament. So God speaks in dreams, and then it goes on to say in visions of the night. And we've heard that this morning. We're going to hear another one. And if you want to share what God has shared with you, please do that. We asked Josh to go first because it's Father's Day, and so we thought it was fitting that we have a father to do that. When deep sleep falls on people as they lie in their beds, God speaks to them in dreams and in visions. We've been through these passages. We're not going to take you through them again, except to say with the very first one, God revealed His plan for the whole universe. For the whole planet, He revealed His plan. And we won't go through it, but you saw the statues. And those of you who've been here before as I preached it, those of you who haven't been, you can look it up. But God has a master plan of time and events for this universe, and He is fulfilling it inch by inch by inch. And so then there's some other ones. We looked at Jacob's dream, and he had several. We looked at Uncle Laban's dream as God told him to leave Jacob alone and stop picking on him and cheating him. And Joseph's dream, and we'll see how God dealt with Joseph. He gave him a dream as a child, but it took him a lifetime to live out that dream. Some of you are stuck in the, well, I thought God told me. But I don't see any fulfillment to that dream. Hang in there. Believe God. He is testing your character right now. And He will fulfill that dream. Joseph's dreams, King Abimelech's dream. And King Abimelech was a heathen king. And God spoke to him through a dream in order to protect Sarah. Not even Abraham, but Sarah. And we kind of ended last week by saying if you're in a, ladies, if you're in a relationship where you don't always feel protected, understand God is protecting you. He is watching over you 24/7, 365. And there is nothing that can happen to you that God can't turn for your good. Your heavenly Father watches over you. Let me hear the women say, amen. I may be married to an imperfect man, not that I'm an imperfect wife, but I may be married to an imperfect man, but God is perfect and He's watching over me and He loves me. Okay, new material. Judges chapter 7 and verse 13. And I'm going to read to you part of that. I'm actually going to start with Judges chapter 6, and I'm reading from the New Living Translation here. Let me just tell you what was happening here. Israel... In fact, maybe I can read it to you. Judges 6:1. And the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. And so the Lord handed them over to the Midians. There was another group of people for 7 years. And the Midians were so cruel that the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in the mountains, in the caves, and in the strongholds to hide from the Midianites, their enemies. And so, we go on and it talks a little bit more about that. And it says that when Israel cried out to the Lord because of Midian, the Lord sent a prophet to the Israelites. Now, the prophet's name was Gideon. Now, let me tell you about Gideon. Interesting story. You think, well, if God's going to speak to me, I got to be perfect. God's going to give me a dream. I have to be in the absolute perfect place with God. Gideon certainly wasn't. Israel cried out to the Lord, and God said, I'll give you a prophet. And He says, I've rescued you from the Egyptians and from all who oppress you, and I drove out your enemies. And I, the Lord your God, I am the Lord your God, and you must not worship other gods, as you were doing, in other words, but listen to me. You have not listened to me. And so verse 11 says, and the angel of the Lord, and by the way, in the Old Testament, when you see the phrase, the angel of the Lord, that literally is an Old Testament appearance of Jesus Christ. Okay? All theologians agree that's an Old Testament appearance of Jesus Christ. And the angel of the Lord came and he sat beneath the tree of Orphah, which belonged to Joash of the clan of Abiezer. And Gideon, the son of Joash, was threshing wheat. He was a farmer at the bottom of the winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites who kept stealing their crops. And the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon. Now he's a farmer. We got a bunch of farmers here. Does God speak to farmers? You betcha. Oh, you better believe he does. And he speaks to industrialists, and he speaks to police officers, and he speaks to husbands and wives and retired folks. And listen to what he says to him. And Gideon was the son of Joash, and he was threshing wheat, hiding at the bottom of the winepress. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, you mighty hero, you mighty man of God. See, when God looks at you, he sees the way you can be if you obey his leading within your life. He looks at you and me, and you see an imperfect pastor. We see each other in an imperfect way. God says, that's my son, that's my daughter. They are perfect. I have set them aside. They are mine. They are awesome. They are special. And he looks at Gideon, this farmer, who, and you're going to see in a couple of verses, wasn't in a very good place with God, wasn't a great man of faith. God declared to him, mighty hero, the Lord is with you. Sir, Gideon replied, speaking to the angel, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Did you ever ask God, God, what are you doing? How come my life is a mess? How come I've been praying and this hasn't been answered and that hasn't been answered and I don't know what's going on with my life, but I don't see you at work, God. That's what Gideon said. Gideon said, we've been through 7 years, and if you'll allow me to use, I believe it was Winston Churchill's words, it was General George Patton, war is hell. And they'd been through war 7 years. And Gideon's response was, oh yeah, God, you're with me? Where? We've been through 7 years of this nonsense, and I can't see you, God. Are you at work in my life? Oh, great man of faith and valor. You get the understanding? You don't have to be in a perfect place to hear God speak to you, either vocally or in dreams or however. Just reach up. He talked with God. And, so God continues to answer him. And let me just find where I left off. The text moved on me here. Sir, if God is with us, why has all this happened? And where are the miracles that our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought them up out of Egypt? And now the Lord has abandoned us. God, I can't find you anywhere. The Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites. And the Lord turned to him and said, you go. He didn't say, you go and get out of my presence, you man who has no faith. He says, you go with the strength that I have given to you and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you. He's a farmer. He has no faith. He's blamed God for the mess when it wasn't God's fault. They were in a mess because they disobeyed God and they were worshiping false gods. And so for 7 years, the Midianites ruled over them. And God looks at him and says, "Oh, great man of faith. Oh, great man of valor. You go deliver your nation." And he says, "But God, I'm a farmer. What am I going to do?" Did you ever feel that way? God, what am I going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do. "But Lord," Gideon replied, "how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest in the whole tribe of Manasseh. And I am the least in my entire family, God. Who am I? Why would you pick on me, God?" He was scared. He'd suffered under the heel of the Midianites for 7 years. And he didn't want to be the one to deliver them. And he goes through, they were so cruel. They did this, they did that. We're hiding in caves and mountains and strongholds. And they steal our crops and all kinds of things. And then it goes to the rest of the story there. And it's absolutely phenomenal. So what's that got to do with dreams? So in the middle of all of this, God gives a dream to the enemy. You thought I was going to say he gave a dream to Gideon. He didn't give a dream to Gideon. Gideon now, he's gone out to the battle and he doesn't have a lot of faith. And now he's thinking, well, probably I should spy out what the enemy is doing. And he's out spying on the people, on the enemies, and he's kind of hidden behind a hill and he's crouching and he can hear the enemy talking on the other side of the hill. And one of the enemy, the Midian army, says to another one, he says, "I had a dream last night." And the guy says, "Really? What was it?" He said, "I dreamt," strange, "I dreamt that this loaf of bread, a barley loaf of bread, fell out of the sky and it landed on one of our tents and the tent just fell apart and flipped upside down." And his friend turns to him and says, also from the Midianite army, and says, "Oh, that's not good." He said, "The God of Israel, that means the God of Israel is going to destroy us." So here's Gideon scared out of his, boxers. He's going, "What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to me?" And all of a sudden he hears the enemy say, "I had a dream." What was the dream? A loaf of bread. What's Jesus, one of his names? We mentioned it in communion this morning. He's the bread of heaven. One of Christ's names is the bread of heaven. Who gave the dream? Jesus. Who appeared to Gideon? Jesus. In the Old Testament. Some of you thought Jesus was born and that was the first. No. Jesus is God and he is eternal and he coexisted and is co-worthy of praise from eternity past and all the way into eternity future. Jesus is God. And so Jesus appeared to him and said, "Almighty man, I'm sending you. I'm sending you." God declares to you what his plans are for you. And we kind of shake our boots. I remember being a little kid. 4 or 5 years of age, and God said, "You're going to be a pastor, you're going to be a missionary, and you're going to teach pastors." I didn't know what that meant. Not a clue. And it probably took me till late into my young adult life to figure out God was serious. He made all that happen. That was the vision that God had given to me, and I didn't understand that vision. So here's this bread falling on the enemy's camp, on their tent, and flopping it over and just devastating that tent. And the other soldier says, "That means their God is going to destroy us." Gideon says, "Oh, gee, I feel a little bit more like a man of valor." And he took his 100 men and took the only thing they had, clay pots, and smashed the clay pots, scared off the enemy and defeated them. See, it isn't that you have the biggest weaponry, it's that you have the biggest God. He can use the dumbest of things to solve problems, can't he? With Moses, it was a stick that he put down in the Red Sea, and the Red Sea parted. A stick. How holy and sacred is that? Probably somewhere the high church has a stick that they say was Moses' stick, and they've turned it into a relic, probably. I'll bet that stick is long gone and nobody knows where it is. So that's Gideon, and God gave a dream to his enemy. And then there's Joseph and Mary. Joseph had many dreams. Obviously, the first dream was when Mary came to Joseph and said, I don't know how to tell you this, but the Holy Spirit came to me and told me that I am pregnant with God's child. Now, what husband to be engaged is going to believe that story? You know? And Joseph, it says, being what's the phrase they use? He was a gentle man. He didn't want to shame her. In those days, if you were pregnant out of wedlock, you were stoned until dead. He didn't want to shame her or humiliate her. He just wanted to quietly put her away. And an angel appeared to Joseph and said, that child that is within her is a holy child. Don't you put her away. Do not be afraid to take her as your wife. That was his first dream. Now, Joseph and Mary are married, and they see what's coming. There's a persecution, and the persecution is Herod wants to kill all the children, little baby Jesus' age, because he's heard that baby child will grow to take over the world. So Joseph says, well, now what do I do? Herod's out to kill our child. I'm in charge of the Savior of the world. You know, I'm the dad. It's Father's Day. Joseph was the dad, the stepdad, if you please. And so God gave him a dream, and the dream was flee to Egypt. Flee to Egypt. Now, if you don't know your geography or your topography, here's the nation of Israel. It's larger up here, and it comes down to a point at at Elat down here. And there's a sea down here. And then way down here is Egypt. So God said to Joseph, you take the baby and Mary and you go to Egypt, and I'll tell you when to leave Egypt. So in this dream, he tells him, go to Egypt, flee to Egypt. And it's important to follow the dreams. If God gives you a dream and you don't do what he tells you to do, don't be surprised if you don't get the fulfillment of the dream. Does that make sense? You know, if God gives you instructions, as crazy as it may sound, Moses, put your rod in the water. God, what good is that going to do? Just do it, please. You know? Said to Israel, take your garbage and bury it outside the city gates. God, that's a lot of work. Besides, that garbage smells. I don't like carrying garbage. God understood microbiology. And he was basically saying to them, I'll keep you healthy if you take your garbage outside the city gates. Because sometimes when God tells you to do something, it feels so dumb and stupid. You say, God, I don't understand that. God says, you don't have to understand it. You just have to do it. Does that make sense? Just do what I tell you to do. And so Joseph and Mary, they flee to Egypt. Now they're down in Egypt for 2 years protecting the Christ child. And God gives Joseph and Mary another dream. That would be Joseph's third, probably Mary's third too. I don't know if the first was a dream, but and so he gives them another dream, and he says to them as they're down in Egypt for 2 years, time to go home. So they think, okay, well, it's time to go home. We obey God, left Egypt, took the long trek back to Israel, and they're beginning to hear rumors about, the man who was trying to kill Jesus may be dead, but there's another man who's a holy terror, unholy terror. And they're still after the Christ child. So don't go to Jerusalem. I will never forget when the pastorate here opened up, and I was in Orchard Park, the big city of Buffalo. I never did like big cities much. Still don't. I just don't like big cities. And I've been to Tulsa, downtown Tulsa, and Broken Arrow, And that's Oklahoma, where our Okies are from. And, I've been to Chicago, and I've been to big cities, all Atlanta. They're okay to visit, but I don't like big cities. I like the country. I'm a country boy at heart. And so sometimes God says, if you want to stay out of trouble, stay away from the big city. Now if everybody leaves the big city, then we're all in trouble. But so he says, instead of going to Jerusalem, go to Galilee. Most of you have heard me talk glowingly about Galilee. It reminds me so much of Western New York. We took the tour bus down the winding hills, and I swear it looked like 394, is it? Coming down from Mayville down, and you look down, and there's the Sea of Galilee, and you can see the sea. And there's grape vineyards on either side as you're coming down, and you come into this idyllic little tourist town. It's really what it is. Galilee. God said, go to Galilee. Go to Galilee. Now, he's also fulfilling prophecy, because there was prophecy that he would come out of Galilee as well. So he's saying, don't go where the child is in danger. I'll send you to Galilee, and he'll be safe there, and you'll be safe there, but return. 2 dreams. Now, you say, yeah, but that's Joseph and Mary. They were big people in God's plan. They were human like you and me. I'm not saying that we shouldn't honor Mary. I mean, she was the woman chosen out of all womanhood, to bear the Messiah. I get that. I understand that. But they were human. Think forward about 12 years after he was born, and they're in Jerusalem now, and they lose the Christ child. And they didn't just lose him for 3 minutes. They lost him for 3 days. How do you explain to God the Father that I lost the Messiah? I mean, they weren't perfect, but God gives them dreams as to how to fulfill this, and God will give you dreams. He says, return to Israel, but go to Galilee, perfection and deliverance. I'm going to end with this, and we're going to close the service so you can get home to be with your family. 1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 5. Solomon had a dream. You say, oh, Solomon. He was a child when he had this dream. God gives children dreams. Oh, I wish we don't, but I wish we had an hour to talk about the dreams that children have shared with me that were amazing. And they weren't made up. They were honest-to-goodness dreams. So Solomon, had this dream, and God says to Solomon, King David's son, God appears to Solomon, and he says, ask me for anything. Don't you wish God would come to you and say, ask me for anything, and I'll give it to you? Well, you know what? He already has. God will give you whatever you need and much of what you want. Yesterday, I had a blast with my daughter. Went horseback riding. I haven't ridden horse since I was 15, and for all those years, for 40-some years, I've wanted to ride horses again. And yesterday, Ginger and I went up to Ripley to the Double Dab riding stable and rode horses for a while. Went out through the woods and had a great time. Going to do it some more. What do you desire? What's on your heart? What do you want from God? And Solomon very wisely said, God, if I'm going to rule your people, I'm not asking for wealth. I'm not asking for riches. I'm not asking for power. I need wisdom. Lord, give me your wisdom. Maybe you're in a situation where you haven't got a clue. What do I do? I need your wisdom, God. And God speaks to him very simply. He said, Solomon, because you've been so careful to not ask for wealth, riches, power, prestige, any of the things that people normally ask for, and you've been thoughtful and you've asked for wisdom, I'm going to give you all of the rest with it. See, God will take care of you. So, whether you're looking for direction for your life, for your family, whether you're looking for God's provision miraculously in your life, whether you're looking for wisdom to know what to do, I know some of you, and I know that as we've talked, you feel stuck in your life. It's like, I don't know how I get from where I'm at to where I think God wants me to be. I don't know how to get there. Ask God. He'll give you the wisdom to get there. And He'll open doors no man can shut, and He'll close doors no man can close.